Planning a Halloween celebration? Well, don't get spooked. I've got you covered. I'm sharing 3 recipes for party desserts that are so good, it's scary. I'll kick things off with spooky s'mores trifles. You know what? Kids and adults love them. Then I'm moving on to a Halloween pumpkin bundt cake because it's Halloween and everybody needs a pumpkin. And finally, I'll wrap it all up with my batty chocolate mint cheesecake. So delicious. Oh, I know you'll want to sink your fangs into this one. Let's start with the s'mores trifles. What is it that we love about s'mores? The melted marshmallow. So I'm starting with a marshmallow sauce. I'm measuring half a cup of water into a small sauce pot, and I need to add some gelatin to it. I'm measuring a teaspoon of gelatin over top, and then I'll turn this on low heat just to dissolve the gelatin. It only takes a minute or 2. My remaining half a cup of water, I'm going to pour into a separate pot. And I'll add to that half a cup of water the sugar, 1.5 cups. And I'm not done yet. Part of what makes marshmallows so sticky is the corn syrup. This recipe, you need a full cup of white corn syrup. I'll turn the sugar mixture on high heat and I'll let that boil without stirring until it reaches 240. Now, my gelatin has had a little time to dissolve and my sugar's just coming up to a boil. So now I will whisk in the gelatin and I'll take this over to my stand mixer. I'm going to pour my hot sugar over a metal spoon to absorb some of the heat. And now you simply whip this on high speed until it cools down and it turns all white and frothy. Marshmallow. I love how that clear liquid transforms to this gooey marshmallow sauce. I want to add some flavor right now. So I'm going to pour in a tablespoon of vanilla bean paste. Quick stir. Now, sauce number 2, a really good, rich chocolate sauce. So I have a saucepan here, and I'm going to measure into that 1 cup of milk. I also need 1 cup of dark brown sugar and ½ cup of unsalted butter. Just over medium heat to melt the sugar in the butter. And once it's melted, then I add my chocolate. I need 12 ounces of semi-sweet. So now I can add my chocolate. And I'll just whisk that in. As soon as the chocolate has melted in and the sauce is smooth, you're good to go. I'm just going to transfer it to a pitcher. That way it cools down a bit. I'll add a teaspoon of vanilla and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Almost time to assemble the s'mores trifles, but I need that graham layer. I am using graham crackers to assemble my little trifles, but I also like to make a graham cracker crumb base. So I need 3 cups of graham cracker crumbs. And just like making a cheesecake crust, I stir the crumbs with a bit of butter. I've melted ½ cup here, and I'll just give that a quick stir, just to coat the crumbs. All right, so now it's assembly time. I've got 8 see-through ramekins, and my first layer, to give it a little base, I'll add a spoonful of the graham cracker crumbs. Just spread it, but you don't have to press it. Then I top the graham cracker crumb with the marshmallow. Wow, look at how that's set up. Gooey goodness. Nice even layer to coat the graham crumbs. Now to separate the marshmallow from the chocolate layer, I have graham cracker squares here. And I'll just set one on top of the marshmallow sauce. Give it a light press. That way you can squish the marshmallow to the sides. There we go. Now for the chocolate sauce. So I can pour it over the graham cracker. So now that layer of graham crumb, marshmallow, graham cracker, chocolate, I repeat all over again. And it should pretty much reach the top of each dish. Back to the graham crackers. Now, chocolate sauce. And there we go. Now, the finishing touch. I top these off with a handful of mini marshmallows right on top. And these look amazing, but I need to bake them off just a little bit. I've preheated the oven to 400 degrees, and you want to give it about 3 to 4 minutes. And the whole function is only to melt the marshmallows and toast them on the top layer. Well, these don't take long. Oh, I love how marshmallows brown. Just makes them look so appetizing. But they're not exactly spooky, are they? Well, a simple decor trick, buying candy eyeballs, just spooks up just about anything. And all of a sudden, an individual dessert takes on a bit of a creepy character. But you know what Halloween also needs? A pumpkin, of course. And you are going to love my Halloween pumpkin bundt cake. Definitely for a big Halloween party. Oh, gooey, 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 all the way through. Seriously, if Halloween had a signature flavor, it would have to be pumpkin. And my Halloween pumpkin bundt cake, well, it is wickedly good. And don't worry, you haven't missed anything. Yes, I have a bundt cake in my hand, but I need 2 for this recipe. So I'm going to set this one aside to cool and start my second pumpkin bundt cake. So let me start off with my 1 cup of unsalted butter that I'm going to cream just to soften it up a bit, make it a little fluffy. I'm going to measure 1.5 cups of sugar into my butter and 1/3 cup of brown sugar. There we go. Now I'll beat this on medium speed until it's smooth and fluffy while I break my 4 eggs into a dish. Add my 4 eggs into my butter. Perfect. Now I'm all set to sift my dry ingredients. 3 cups of all-purpose flour, my baking powder, 2 teaspoons. I need a teaspoon each of cinnamon and ginger, 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg, 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I like this cake recipe because it is really quite simple. But at the heart of it, it's gotta be the pumpkin. I'll measure out 1.5 cups of pumpkin puree. So what I do now is I add my dry ingredients and then add the pumpkin. Now I add the pumpkin puree all at once. There we go. Now everything's combined. And now a little something extra because it's Halloween. 1 1/3 cups of white chocolate chips. I'll just fold those in. A big cake recipe like this is best baked in a bundt tin because the hole in the tin allows the heat from the oven to get into the center. It evenly cooks the cake. I've greased it and floured it. That way I know it will turn out of the pan nicely. And then I'll just dollop this in. What I love about a pumpkin bundt cake is because of the pumpkin, it stays moist for ages. Now, to bake a cake like this nicely, I first start by heating my oven to 375. And I pop the cake in and let it bake just for 5 minutes at that temperature. Then I reduce it to 325 and let it go for an hour. Here is my second bundt cake out of the oven. And after I let the bundt cakes cool in the tins for about half an hour, then I tip them out to cool completely. So now it's time for the frosting. And the style of frosting I'm making is an Italian buttercream. What I have here are 6 egg whites at room temperature, and I'm going to whip them up to a soft peak, adding 1/2 cup of sugar. Now it's time to cook some sugar. That's the secret behind an Italian meringue. Look at this, 2 measuring cups. It's Halloween, I'm getting crazy here. I've got 1/2 cup of water already in my pot, and I'm going to add 1.5 cups of sugar to that. I bring up to a full boil, and I cook it to 240. Once the sugar hits 240, I take it and I add it to the whipping egg whites. The heat from the sugar cooks the egg whites, so when I add the butter, you've got a frosting that's kind of fluffy, yet creamy at the same time. You have to add 2.5 cups of butter. Now for a little flavoring, a tablespoon of vanilla, Ooh, there it is. Just so fluffy and light. And now I need to tint the buttercream. So I'll start with some orange coloring. All right, and now for a little touch of the brown, just to add a little earthiness to the frosting itself. There, I think that's a good earthy pumpkin. And before I assemble, I want to set aside a little frosting and tint it brown so I have it for the top of the pumpkin. And all I'm doing is adding a little bit of sifted cocoa powder. Lovely. Now it's pumpkin time. So the first thing I need to do is level off this pumpkin bundt cake. That way, the two cakes stack nicely together. To fill the center of the cake, I basically build a mini cake. Using cookie cutters, I cut out rounds from this top layer and stack them with frosting in between, and that fills in the center. So now, before I put the top layer on, I'm going to spread on a level layer of frosting. There we go. And I bring over my second cake and do the same thing. There we go. So I'm simply using my piping tip, piping up and over. And this is going to make it so much easier to spread. Wow, that is certainly a pumpkin. Now I still have the stem to add. I'm going to use my cookie cutters again, and I'll cut the base of the stem, and I'll just spread some chocolate frosting and just cover this up. I take a fork and just mark those stem marks. There. Now, I've got green leaf fondant color here, and I'll cut out a big leaf. You can buy these leaf cutters at the same place you would get any cookie cutters. I do like to make these leaves ahead of time, but if I lay them flat, then they'll dry that way. So what I do, take a piece of tin foil and give it a little crinkle. Then you can drape your leaves so they get a bit of a natural wave to them. You want to give it about at least 2 hours to let dry. After they've dried for a bit, and they hold that lovely curled profile. Now that is a stunning party dessert. If you're setting out a dessert table, this will be the centerpiece. If a dessert like this isn't enough for you, wait until you see my chocolate mint cheesecake. You are gonna go